Hello and welcome back to Toy Thursday with Johnny Tiger on February 23rd, 2023. I had a bit of a long day and this has been a crazy busy week. First, let me catch you guys up to date. This Sunday, I will be selling uh, some of my artwork. These are one of a kind, very unique, hand drawn, hand etched pieces done by yours truly. Um, and each one of them will have their own unique serial number for those of you that collect. And because they are hand produced, there will be only one of each ever produced. So it's not something that you can uh, find a second copy of later. Okay, so this Sunday I'll be selling them here in Vancouver at the BMO Art Theater over at uh, 162 West First Avenue, right by the Falls Creek area over there. I will be there in person tending the display between 1 p.m. and 9:30 p.m. So if you are in the local area, please stop by and take a look and say hi. So because of that upcoming event, it's been a long week, and so I am probably not quite as energetic as I should be right now. So we'll jump right into today's list of action figures because we have quite a few that we're going to be talking about and looking at. Last week, we looked at figures that I didn't want but got. Anyway, so following on that, today we're going to look at figures that I wanted for various reasons, and some of them I ended up really disliking, and we're going to look at them one at a time and sort of have a little chat about them. Next week, we'll be looking at some really cool figures because next week we'll be looking at figures that I really, really, really wanted. The Basically, we'll be looking at some of the best or my personal favorite in my collection and talking about them. So, starting us off, here is Arya Stark from Game of Thrones, made by Funko Legacy when they still did some 6-inch action figure when they had the Game of Thrones toy line. This was a figure that I wanted, but I didn't want to buy. No, why is that? Like, some people say, well, what? You just want other people to buy you your action figures? No, that's not what I mean. See, I did not want to buy Arya. First, because, well, I don't really like her as a character. I know that a lot of people out there probably jumping off their seats and that we love Arya. What are you talking about? Look, she's okay, maybe in the TV series. I don't know. I haven't even watched the Game of Thrones TV series. Yeah, I know I'm really far behind. I read the books, and in the books, Arya is really, really bloody boring for the most part. She's this little girl running around trying to learn how to be an assassin, but like other than occasionally getting into fights with people and stuff like that, she hasn't really have a lot of personality to her. Like she's just not that fun comparing to the rest of the characters. So I didn't really have a personal connection. Like I didn't have a personal liking to the character. And second, she was made by Funko in the Legacy line. If you are not a collector, you probably don't know what I'm talking about. But if you are a collector, then you know what I mean when I say Funko Legacy action figure in the Game of Thrones line were really a hit and miss. A lot of them have such bad quality control that as soon as you move their arms will fall off. As soon as you move the leg fall off. It was just a mess. Like seriously, a lot of these Game of Thrones figures I had to super glue multiple times. to get them to be able to be displayed on the shelf. And so that's the second reason why I wanted Arya, but I didn't want to buy her because I knew that quality control was going to be an issue. Third reason, Arya is such a small character. Now, when you're spending, let's say, $20 for a character, and every character costs the same, then it's kind of logical that you want the bigger character because then you're getting more for your money. For a small character like this, and she only comes with one tiny, puny little sword, nothing else, you feel like you're getting ripped off. So that's the third reason. Now, I wanted her because of my personal uh, attraction to medieval fantasy action figures, and she, as far as design goes, she is like this orphan girl with a sword. So that alone made her kind of interesting on the display shelf. She kind of blend in really good in the background if you need a orphan or a beggar or street character. So she's useful on the display. And I am a fan of Game of Thrones, so I just uh, I felt that I needed an Arya, but I still didn't want to buy her. So it was really lucky for me that one of my best friends, Wesley, bought her for me for my birthday. I believe that 3 years ago, 4 years ago. So Wesley, thanks a lot because I wanted this lady, but I really didn't want to buy her. I really wish I know how to edit videos. I like so many cool creators of videos on YouTube that do action figure reviews and stuff like that. And when they cut to another scene, they sometimes have this little cool sound effect like or boom, something like that. I wish I could do that, but yeah, I'm not that good at editing video. I don't know how to edit video, and I don't know how to add sound effects. So anyway, we will now move on to the next figure we'll be looking at today. This figure falls into the category of someone or something I wanted but wish I never gotten him in the first place. Enters Conan the Barbarian, made by Todd McFarlane, and I believe this one came out in 2005, or maybe a little bit later. It was around that time anyway, so it's quite an old figure. So some of you may say, "What's wrong with him? Like, why do you say that you wanted him but you wish you never gotten him? You don't like him?" No, I like him just fine. He's actually a really good looking action figure, especially, like most of Todd McFarlane's stuff that came out around that time. The sculpture on this guy is amazing. All the folds and details in his armor and his muscles and his weapon. This is a really good looking action figure. There's no doubt about that. But I wish I never have gotten him because, like most of Todd McFarlane's action figures from that time, he can't move. Yeah, the guy, like, he has some articulation in his elbow and wrist, but that's about it. Like, maybe his waist. But this guy is forever stuck in this pose where he's turning to the side, ready to deliver a strike with his sword or his axe. He's stuck in that pose. There's nothing you can do with this guy. Now, that on its own wouldn't be so bad because I knew what I was getting into when I bought him. I had been a collector of action figure for a long time, and I've known a fair share of Todd McFarlane's action figures from the 90s up to the 2000s, up to 2020. So when I got this guy, I had no illusion that he was going to be articulated. I knew what I was getting. But what make me wish I never gotten him is since the release of him, Todd McFarlane has abandoned the Conan Barbarian license. He did two series of Conan the Barbarian license, two waves, and then he abandoned it. And then now there are much better Conan figure being made by Mezco and being made by Super 7. Both of these properties, uh, Mezco and Super 7, are making Conan the Barbarian that is super articulated. You can put them in any poses you want. They come with a whole tons of accessories. They're just better than this Conan in so many different ways, and I wish I never got this guy. Because if I didn't have this one, I can just go ahead and pick one up that's made by Super 7, or pick one up that's made by Mezco, and I will have a really articulated, really cool Conan on the shelf. Now, some of you might be thinking, well, you can still go and buy them. No one's saying that you can't. But one thing that I've mentioned before, one thing about me is I very, very rarely will go out of my way to acquire multiple versions of a character, uh, no matter what's going on. Like I try to only have one Conan. I try to only have one Superman. I try to only have one Wolverine. I don't want a whole lot of Superman, a whole lot of Wolverine, and I don't want five different Conan on my shelf. Yeah, because that makes the display really awkward. And honestly, when money is tight and space is limited, we there's just no way to do this properly when you have multiple copies of a character crowding the shelf. So even though the Super 7 Conan and the Mezco Conan are both superior to this Conan in so many ways, I am not going to get them because, like I said, this Conan, despite not having adequate articulation and accessory, is still a good looking Conan. And since I already got him, I'm going to stay faithful to this action figure. Just pretend that I have some special super cool sound effects here when we switch to the next action figure. Next, we are going to look at a figure that I wanted but then really, really disliked it. This may sound a lot like the previous category, figure that I wanted but wish I never got in the first place. But there's a really fundamental difference. Conan, like the figure I just showed you guys, I wish I never gotten him because there's a lot better ones out there right now. But that doesn't mean that I dislike the figure. Like I will still say it's a really good looking figure of Conan the Barbarian, and I liked it a lot for many years after I got it. This figure I'm going to show you guys next was a figure that when I saw that it was being sold, when I read about it, I said, "Oh, I want that." But then when I got it in my hand, I went, "What kind of crap is this?" Here is Hades, made by Mattel in the Disney Hercules line. I can't even remember when this figure was made. I think this was 1995 or around that time. I got this guy off eBay, so I can't really say how old he is. I know he's from the 90s. Uh, yeah, look, I love Hercules. I love the story of Hercules. I grew up being really big into mythology, fantasy, and all that stuff. And Hercules and the Greek gods and all those figures, those characters, were something that always on my want list. Like, you don't even need to tell me much about the action figure. If you say, hey Johnny, that's an action figure of Ares, or that's an action figure of Aphrodite, or did you know someone made an action figure of Hades? I think Mattel's case, I was aware, and I go and buy it. Yeah, because I grew up hearing about these gods and goddesses and characters. So when I heard about a Hades action figure made by Mattel, I rushed online, looked it up on eBay, and purchased him. And then when I got him in my hand, I was like, what kind of a piece of crap is this? Like, this is so featureless and smooth and cheap feeling that it feels like a kind of toy that you can find maybe in a dollar store. And it has like 4 points of articulation. The arms can swing up and down. The head can turn left and right. And that fire effect, like the flame on his shoulder, can go up and down. That's it. You can't move him in any other way. And the arms cannot bend at the elbow or anything. There's nothing that can break this weird pose that he has. He does have a fireball that can shoot out from his palm that with like a spring-loaded accessory. So I guess that's something. Honestly, this guy would be probably okay if you were buying it for 5-year-old. It might be a fun toy, but uh, yeah, he's just a disappointment in every way. He doesn't fit in with my collection. He looks totally ridiculous, and he feels so cheap that just handling him makes me feel that I want my money back. Now we're going to look at a figure that I wanted, but it took me a long time to get one. Here is Arnold Schwarzenegger as a T-800 Terminator from Terminator movie. This is a figure that taken from the scene where he assaulted the police station and killed a bunch of cops in the movie. A very iconic Terminator scene and a very iconic look for this character. Now, uh, I wanted Terminator for a long time. In the early 90s, Terminator made by Kenner, and the Terminator that were being made by Kenner were too small. They were like 4 inches, barely 5 inches tall, and they looked very silly. So I didn't want them. Even as a kid, I didn't want them. Finally, Todd McFarlane made some Terminator figures in his movie Maniac line in the late 90s and early 2000s. Those looked fine, but Todd McFarlane did some weird Terminator face that didn't look like Schwarzenegger at all. And the idea was that Schwarzenegger wouldn't license the figure, so Todd McFarlane ended up with some really disfigured looking Terminator. And then NECA got the license and started making Terminator action figure. But in the beginning of their run, NECA just made immobile, like figures that barely moved and easy to break. Like their earlier runs were really, really bad. So from the 90s to the 2000s, and finally, it wasn't until like early last year that I got this Terminator made by NECA in their new Ultimate line, which is a much more improved uh, figure that actually have accessories and articulation and it doesn't break. It took me a good almost 30 years before I got a Terminator figure that I deemed, okay, good enough. It's time to get a Terminator. Now, just to clarify, this is not my first Terminator action figure. I did get one that made by McFarlane that was all disfigured and didn't even look anything like Schwarzenegger. Uh, so I barely ever count that one. Plus, that one was not articulated. Uh, it's like the Conan figure I showed you earlier, basically stuck in one pose. I also have another Terminator figure made by NECA a couple of years ago from, was it Dark Fate? Or was it Terminator 4? Uh, the Terminator movie that had an old looking Terminator. So I have that one. But again, I don't count that one as the iconic Terminator because that looked like an old man Schwarzenegger. That's an old Schwarzenegger. So it took me this long to finally get iconic looking proper movie Terminator that was good enough to add to the collection. You may be wondering, wait, didn't you just say you don't like to have multiple copies of a character? Uh, so how come you just admit now that you have multiple Terminators? Well, a simple answer for that one is that Terminator is something that you can actually have multiple copies of. Like, if you guys look at some of the scenes when they do in Terminator, when they show the future apocalypse, you'll see hundreds or thousands of Terminators that look exactly the same walking around. There's like a whole army of them. So Terminator to me is not really one character. It's a lot of Terminators that just happen to look similar. So you can have 10, 20, 50 Terminators on the shelf, and that still be okay. But you can't say the same about Batman. Like if you have two Batman standing on the shelf, then suddenly it starts to look a little bit weird. And then you have if you have four Batman standing on the shelf, then it starts to look repetitive and it doesn't even make any sense. Anyway, that's my justification. Let's move on. We are going to now look at a figure that I wanted just because it is something that going to uh, pique my curiosity. Here is Peely from the Fortnite video game made by Jazzware. Now, ordinarily, this would not be a figure that I want to have anything to do with, right? I mean, it's so goofy that it doesn't fit in with anything I have on the shelf, and it's made by a company that I have very little faith in. And on top of that, he's from a video game that I have absolutely no interest in. So why did I want him? Well, honestly, just look at him. This this is a man-sized walking banana. Okay. Now, just imagine for a second if you're blind and someone tell you there's an action figure of a banana that walks around carrying guns and axes and fight people. Now, if that doesn't pique your curiosity enough to say, "Oh, I would really love to get that in my hand and see what that feels like or look like," if you don't even feel that, then this is not going to make sense to you. I heard a very good advice to uh, artists, entertainers, performers a long time ago. This very wise person said that if you are in an entertaining business or if you are into art, creating art, the only way for you to get better, the only way for you to improve is to expand your horizon. You need to travel and see new things. Now, being blind, I don't get to see a lot of new things, literally. Like, even if I go traveling, it's not going to give me a lot of inspiration because I don't get to see the cool looking buildings and stuff like that. And It's not like I can actually feel them. I can feel the wall, but one wall just feel like another wall to me, right? So one of the reasons for me to be able to become the artist that I am today, whether in music or in sculpture or in tactile drawing, is the fact that I have a lot of action figures. Now, this may sound like me making excuse for spending money on toys, but this is absolutely true. Okay, this through the action figures, especially unique new action figures, is how I expand my horizon and imagination. This is how I learn pop culture. This is how I can get new ideas. Like before feeling the action figure Peely, I probably would never be able to even grasp what would it be like to draw a walking banana that holds guns and shoot people. But now that I have examined this action figure Peely, I get it in my head. Okay, so if I want to draw a banana and an animated killer banana, this is how I would do, and this is what I would change and stuff like that. Okay, so um, this is why action figures like Peely is so goofy, so different, uh, will definitely pique my interest, and quite often I will buy them, regardless if they fit into my collection or not, just because it's such a great, refreshing, new learning experience for me. Next, we'll move on to two last action figures that I'm going to show you guys today, and both of them I wanted to get them, figures like them, due to almost a personal bias, a personal connection to something that I can relate to them. Here is Professor X from X-Men series, and this one was made quite a long time ago, over 10 years ago, I believe, by Toy Biz when they still had the Marvel Legend license. Uh, Again, honestly, unless I am trying to complete the X-Men team and really needed a Professor X, he wouldn't be the kind of action figure that I would go out of my way to get. I mean, he is a guy in a suit, sitting in a wheelchair. He doesn't really do a heck of a lot. Most of his superpower uh, re- revolve around mentally controlling people, which doesn't really show in action figure form. So when you get a figure like this, basically you just stick him in his wheelchair and put him on the shelf, and you'll forget about him pretty quickly because he doesn't. It's not. It's not like a Spider-Man where you can stick him in different poses and get him into battles and stuff like that. He's just a guy in a wheelchair. But it's because he's a guy in the wheelchair that I wanted to get him. Right? If Professor X was without his wheelchair. Like if he's just a guy that's standing there using mental power to control others, I probably could have happily skipped him, unless again, unless I needed him to build the X-Men team. But it's because of that disability he has. Okay, he's a guy in a wheelchair. I am a guy who's blind, so right there, there's a connection. I will always go out of my way to try to acquire action figures that show a character that has disability. Yes, I do have Daredevil as well, before you guys ask. Uh, so yeah, if it's an action figure that depicts a character that has some kind of disability, that's almost a no-brainer. I will get it, even if it's the most boring action figure out there. Now we have Shaolin from Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings. This was from the Marvel Legend line by Hasbro. It came out a couple of years ago. Again, ordinarily, I wouldn't say she's like that good of a figure. She's actually got a kind of a boring design, and she's kind of small. She comes with a build-a-figure body part that I had no interest in, and she's kind of expensive on top of that. Uh, like not that like super expensive. She's not in the high-end category, but I believe she was like I don't know, $25, $26, like $32 Canadian. So $32 Canadian getting something like this that's kind of small and yeah, like let's just say she didn't wow me, but I wanted her uh, uh, regardless for several reasons actually. First, second, and third, she's a Chinese martial artist. Yeah. Now, just like figures with disability, I will usually go out of my way to acquire action figures that depict an Asian character. Now, there is a fine distinction here. That doesn't mean that I'm just going to go buy all the Japanese anime, manga, uh, uh, based action figures because they are Asian. Okay, Asian action figure is different from action figures of Asian characters. Not to mention most of those characters in anime and manga, they don't even look Asian. They are like this really weird caricature of what Japanese people think Asians look like in comic book. So anyway, uh, that's just my own gripes against Japanese-made action figures. Uh, Super expensive, overpriced pieces of crap, if you ask me. But anyway, I will go out of my way to support, acquire action figures that depict an honest to God Asian actor, Asian actress, or Asian character. Uh, and then on top of that, Shaolin is a martial artist in the film, and with my martial art background, that like a double whammy right there. She's Asian, she's martial artist, so almost no brainer. I was going to acquire him or acquire her. Did I say him? Like I said, energy level is kind of low and running lower. There's a third reason why I really wanted Shaolin and other action figures from Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings. It's because that is one movie that Kitten and I watched again and again and again. We both enjoyed the hell out of it. We loved that movie. And having these action figures just feel that sentimental spot when Kitten and I, we are not together, and I come across my Shang-Chi figures. It makes me think of all the times we had watching the movie together. So there's a great deal of sentimental value in this particular action figure and others from the Shang-Chi series as well. Someone asked me once if I would get to a point where I say, okay, I reached 1,000 action figures, and that's enough. I'll never get any more action figures. Or I've completed my Marvel collection, so I'm not going to collect anymore. My answer to that is, I hope not. There has always been, and I hope will always be, action figures, characters, and designs that I want to check out. I want to find out what they feel like in my hand. I want to put them together and put them in different poses and maybe draw some pictures and make some artwork based on them. I think if there comes a day when I say that's it, I'm not buying any more action figures anymore, ever again, I think that will signify something very horrible is happening inside of me. I think if it comes one day when I'm no longer curious about new action figures, if I'm no longer interested in new action figures, I think there's a very endearing, very uh, very innocent part of me would probably have died on that day. So I hope that day will never come. I know this is going to be a long journey of collecting and spending an awful lot of money, but it's something I enjoy, something that inspired me to make beautiful artwork, and something that gave me things to talk about on video. Thank you for checking out today's episode, and don't forget, if you are local, drop by to the BMO Art Theater, 162 West First Avenue in Vancouver this Sunday between 1 p.m. and 9:30 p.m. to check out some of Johnny Tiger's one-of-a-kind artwork. Thank you, and I'll see you guys again tomorrow.